Welcome to the Free the Mental Slave interview discussion. Today we have Heather Ventresco. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
If you could just give us a brief overview of who you are and what role you play at the university.
Okay, so my name's Heather, and I'm a fifth semester student of international relations. I am also the head of political education for ASTA. I also work on the Clay Moon organizing team. I'm also a public speaker. I speak at conferences on topics related to trauma and also related to race.
Oh wow, you do a lot. So the reason why you're here is because of the upcoming event on Wednesday, Racism from a White Perspective. What's your stand on that?
So my stand on that, I guess, is that, what everyone's stand hopefully is that, racism is a negative thing, but all too often it sort of takes a back seat to the way we perceive ourselves. So nobody wants to say they're racist. So for instance, there was recently a KKK march in South Carolina, and even the people who attended that rally say, well, I'm not a racist, but, so we all have this way in which we're so quick to deny racism that we have all these blind spots, that we ignore the ways in which race and racism really do have a significant impact on our lives.
So what exactly are you aiming at achieving with this event? What do you want students to go away with, and what are you expecting to do exactly?
So my hope is that, students will walk away with a little bit of a clearer understanding, especially those who grew up in a post-colonial power. For instance, I grew up in the United States. If you grew up in a place that was a colonizer, or if you grew up in a place that was colonized, the way in which you perceive your own race can be drastically different and can be heavily influenced by things like the media that you consume and the compulsory education that you were given. So I would like students to be aware of the ways in which they were influenced by this, and I would like them to be able to take a step back, be able to put aside the defensiveness that comes along with discussions about race, and just really take some time and think about what that means, so that they are able to interact and support, their non-white colleagues in a real way, in a way that's not, I'm not racist, but in a way that is actually supportive, that is actually, yeah.
So it's evident that a lot of people actually feel discriminated against with regards to their race, but no one really ever comes up to talk about these racial issues. And as a white woman, what right do you think you have to be talking about these racial issues? Because it's obviously evident that you haven't experienced racism from a personal spectrum. So what position do you feel that you're in that could give you the right to talk to other people with regards to race?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So what position do I think I'm in? I've asked myself that several times. So a lot of the speakers that you've had in your series have been very distinguished professors. You had an interview with Professor Lund the other day, Dr. Natasha Kelly come in and speak. So clearly that is not me. I'm just one person who had a moment of clarity in her life regarding race and regarding the way that it impacts citizens in the United States. And when I started paying attention, and then I started doing some studying, and started having a more complete understanding of why my brain works the way it does, why do I think the way I do about particular topics, it really moved me. And as I said, I have a career and a skill in public speaking. And so it's not so much to speak to black students or non-white students about what they should be doing, but rather to talk to my white colleagues to say, hey, let's collectively sort of try to get on the same page. Let's create a space that is more open, more accepting, and more honest, and more willing to hear feedback on race. It's interesting, when I first started in political education, I thought, it'd be great to have a conversation about race on this campus because we're so diverse, so clearly it's something that should be addressed. And all of the non-white students that I spoke to were like, yes, that would be awesome, oh my God, I would love that. And all of the white Germans were like, I don't think we need that here. Nobody needs to. There's no problems with race on this campus. So just by virtue of being white, and of being in a position of privilege, which I know a lot of people hate that word, but by being in that position where you are the norm, where you are the majority, there are blind spots, So, and I have a lot of them. So that's my hope in this discussion is it's filled with a lot of social theory, a lot of data and empirical evidence, but it's also sort of my story and my life and how I arrived at these places and the ugly parts of myself that I had to look at. So this isn't about waving a finger at anybody and being like, you're a very bad white person, you should feel very terrible. But more to say, oh, you know, let's just be honest. Let's really crack it open and look at it. And, you know, here's me. I'll serve myself up on a platter. Here's my foolishness. This is what it looked like, you know.
So who's your target group? From basically what you've just explained, you obviously have a specific target group that you're aiming at to kind of convey the message and to illustrate the position that you take in order for them to kind of see their position in society. So who exactly is that target group?
So this is a dear white people situation. So obviously all of our colleagues here who are not white, I welcome you. I would love for you to come. Perhaps you can learn a bit about brain science. I'll talk a little bit about that, and then maybe more just to understand why your very nice white friends turn into lunatics sometimes when the conversation turns to race, why your otherwise reasonable, you know, rational colleagues will get really deeply uncomfortable and weird when talking about race. But my audience, my intended audience is white people, to say, let's have an honest talk, let's have an honest look, and let's do it with gentleness and with humor, but let's be real.
So from your perspective, why do you think if we have an African person or a European person, when race is an issue, why do you think automatically certain people shut down and they become defensive and they don't want to deal with the issue, and it's, oh, I have a black friend, it's okay, I'm fine, I definitely can't be deemed as racist because I have a black friend, and that's like the logo right now, I have a black friend, so I can't be racist. Why do you think people take certain positions when racism or race is an issue?
So it's tricky. So first, you know, when talking about racism or talking about, you know, what level of woke you are, it's a spectrum. There's not one particular thing that you can do or say that makes you a racist or not a racist, you know. Even, you know, so even people who are pretty actively white supremacists, you know, maybe they dated a black person at one point, and that's not a get out of racism free card. Conversely, there are people like myself who really work hard at it, who really study and who really try, you know, to understand this whole construct, who will inevitably put their foot in their mouths and do something stupid. And so the best we can hope for is to create an awareness so that when I inevitably do something stupid, when you say to me, oh, Heather, that was hurtful, that wasn't really cool, that instead of having that immediate defensive reaction, that I'll be able to hear you and have a conversation about it and, you know, move forward from there. So in the discussion, I talk about the good-bad binary, which is a theory of Dr. Robin DiAngelo, where there's such a positive connotation with not being racist, and there's such a negative connotation with being racist that we sort of avoid it at all costs, even if we very clearly are being, you know, engaging in racist behavior, to say, nope, I'm not racist. And that is where that sort of weirdness comes from, that I can't possibly have such a negative term applied to me, even if I did even unintentionally do something that was quite hurtful.
So where do you draw the line? Because your hurtful might not be my hurtful. So where exactly do you think the line starts and where does it end?
That's a great question, and I'm not sure that there is a line. I hear from people, oh, people are so sensitive nowadays. Oh, I have to think about everybody's feelings. And for me, like, it just makes perfect sense. Of course I'm going to think about people's feelings. Like, you are my friend, you are my colleague. If you tell me that something I'm doing is hurtful, why wouldn't my response be, oh, I'm sorry, like, let me fix that. So if I bumped into you and I stepped on your toe and you said, ow, that hurt, I would immediately say I'm sorry. Because, like, why wouldn't I? I messed up and I stepped on your foot and it hurt. But there's this unwillingness, it seems, around race to believe that what we did was hurtful. Again, because of that good-bad binary. Because then if I admit that I did something that was hurtful to you, then that racist label sort of gets applied to me, that I did something racist, which is just unacceptable. It's not something that I can process about my own identity, that I did something racist.
Why do you think people work so hard at defending themselves, at not being a racist, rather than actually trying to understand what being a racist is and how you actually become a racist? Because a lot of the times people don't just become racist, there's certain factors that contribute to them being a racist. So why do you think people don't then try to investigate as to why am I possibly a racist and what could contribute to that fact?
So that's a lot to unpack, and I go over a lot of this in the lecture. So part of it is part of our basic neurology and the way that our brain sort of protects our sense of self. And so if we have this sense of self that we want to nurture and take care of, and if we have this good-bad binary that tells us that being racist is a terrible, terrible thing, that you're a very bad person, so your brain is going to try and push that away, that no, you're not racist. But also there's something called attribute theory that we tend to ascribe positive attributes to people who are like us and negative attributes, to people who are not like us. Because we all like to think highly of ourselves, and we all like to believe that there's internal and external attributes. So internal meaning I'm a good person, I did something well. External means it's the situation. So when something goes well for me, it's an internal attribute. It's because of what I did. But if something goes poorly for me, it's an external attribute. But then we tend to flip it around for others, So if something's going poorly for you, it must be because you're a bad person, it must be because you're lazy. So we have this sort of these self-serving attributes, and then we want to believe that the world is a just and fair place. So if I see that this group of people doesn't seem to be keeping up with my group of people, it can't possibly be because there's systemic injustice and the world is really a tough place. It must be that they don't deserve it. It must be that they're not working hard enough. It must be that they aren't as good people as I am. So there's a lot of psychological theory, there's a lot of social theory, there's a lot of brain science, and I'm going to go over a fair amount of that in the lecture, and try and keep it not too complicated. But it's worth examining. So to understand that, part of why we act the way we act is sort of a neurobiological response, but then a part of it is how we've been programmed to act.
So what do you have to say to people that say, oh, I'm colorblind, where certain issues then arise where, they put in a position where they feel that, oh, this might be racist, but I don't want to seem like I'm a racist, so I'll just defend myself and say, I'm colorblind, I don't see color, everyone for me is the same. What do you have to say to people like that?
I hear that they are very well intentioned, when people say, oh, I'm colorblind, or there's just one race, the human race, and that is very well intentioned and that's very kind, but if I may have your arm, they're not the same. Like, we look different. And I don't point that out, to say that one of us is better or worse, but rather that our experiences based on that will be different. So, race is a social construct, it's not a real thing. Yeah, we know that. I think most people know that, and we'll also talk about that in the lecture. But the impact that this construct of race has on us is very real, and it's felt in very real ways, and it manifests itself in very real ways. My experience coming here to this international university, studying with people from all over the world, has been really, really impactful, and has been a real eye-opener to my privilege of having light skin, of coming from a powerful country. The way that I get treated is, in my experience in coming here, has been very, very different than many of my colleagues. And so when you say, I'm colorblind and there's only one race, while I hear that your heart is in the right place, you're shutting down the opportunity to hear about, someone else's experience. You're shutting off, yourself from hearing that your colleague's experience may be very, very different from yours.
Oh, I think we should wrap up before we give away too much of your presentation, just so you have enough to say on Wednesday. So do you have any words that you would like to give to the students to kind of motivate them to come, and those that are skeptical, and that it's okay to be white and to come to the event?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said earlier, no one is going to yell at you, no one's going to shake their finger at you. I am a white person. It's okay to be white. You don't have to feel bad about that. But let's have an honest conversation. Let's look at the ways in which we can make our beautiful international campus a more safe, more accepting, a more equitable place for all of the students here.
Actually, now that you mentioned everything you mentioned, with what you're going to be presenting, what do you think African students or students of color can actually take from this? Because your target group is obviously predominantly white people, but everyone of color obviously is welcomed, as you suggested, and we welcome everyone. What will they take from this?
Well, like I said before, hopefully they will have an understanding of some of these social constructs, of some of these theories, a bit of history, a bit of neurobiology, and also just maybe a better understanding of why their white colleagues engage in behaviors that are so frustrating, that are just so maddening. Oftentimes it's something that is almost subconscious, that their reactions sometimes are just so inherent or so deeply ingrained in themselves that they don't even sort of realize that they're having those reactions. And so maybe will just help you to have a better understanding of some of your colleagues.
So this presentation will basically be a bridge for diversity, to bring everyone of color, Europeans, all together, to kind of have common grounds, common understanding.
That's a very high aspiration. So Heather, you're going to save the world. I hope for a small piece of that.
Thank you very much, Heather, for always being such a delight and being an amazing person and being a student on campus and leading by example and really creating awareness, promoting diversity and building the bridge for equality for everyone. We really appreciate your work. So to all the students that are skeptical, to those that are definitely coming, we will see you on Wednesday, and Heather, you have your job cut out for you. So till then, free your mental slave.